friends, today's topic of discussion is social reform and Hindi films colonial times. In the earlier lecture on the same theme, we talked about how the contribution of the socially just reform movement leaders definitely played an important role in terms of bringing about social reform in the Indian society. We also talked about some of the films and how films definitely play an important role in bringing about some kind of changes in society. When the film viewers, when the audience, the spectators, they go and watch films, then definitely they are influenced by some of the ideas which are there in the films, and many times we find that it plays an important role in terms of bringing about behavioral changes in the society. And in that context, we talked about the role of cinema. We also talked about in the earlier lecture about Swami Dayanand. We talked about Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, and Swami Vivekananda's contribution apart from Mahatma Gandhi, who definitely brought about some kind of changes in the framework of the national movement. And we also talked about that how cinema can be some sort of a media vehicle in the society, and the kind of films which were made by some of the filmmakers of that period, they were not only talking about issues of women, where they were talking about the prohibition of child marriage, female infanticide, mismatched marriages, but they were also talking about untouchability in the caste system, and how the colonial censors, they were more concerned with the ideas of any revolutionary or any kind of a democratic concept, and they were not ready to, in a way, show them in the kind of films which were either shown by the films which were coming from Hollywood, or the kind of cinema which was coming from Russia, and they wanted to censor everything and anything which was in a way politically inspired or which was talking about the ideas of democracy. We also talked about a film called Achut Kanya and how it made some kind of a plea for equality in the society in the last lecture. And now we'll talk about some more films which were trying to communicate the ideas of social reform in the films, and one of them was Duniya Na Mane, which was dealing with the issue of mismatched marriages in the society, that how young girls, they were being married to an old man, and her defiance is being reflected in her refusal to apply vermilion on the parting of her hair, and her active refusal to be intimidated and to succumb to the authority of her husband and his aunt. And it also reflects her determination and the strength of character as well. And finally she refuses to consummate her marriage as well. So we find that the kind of role which was being taken up by Shanta Apte in that particular film, and when she is being tricked into marriage because a young person was shown to her, and finally she was being married to an old person, and she is very resolute in her kind of a decision that she would not accept a person who had been in a way got married to her through some kind of a trickery. And we find that she has that kind of a revolutionary reform spirit of that woman, and she realizes that the emancipation of women lies in their own hands, and she makes all sorts of efforts to overcome her problems. And finally we find that her husband develops some kind of a sense of guilt, and he finally accepts her as his daughter-in-law and takes a vow from her that she will remarry after his death, and he commits suicide. So we find that divorces were not all that common in that particular kind of a society, and this film which was made in 1937 was way ahead of its time, and the director could not find any kind of a solution in the sense that the only solution which was being provided was the guilt of the person who had committed this kind of an injustice to the girl, and the kind of punishment for that guilt was only death, because the society was not accepting the divorces which were there. It was considered to be some sort of a stigma in that particular point of time. So when you talk about the filmmakers, their purpose, then we find that how the filmmaker wanted to arouse the girls in that sense that they should become thinking individuals, because they were, if any, they were victims of any kind of injustice which had happened to them. So they had to fight and not submit easily to their perpetrators. So that was the kind of purpose which V. Shantaram wanted to, in a way, tried to convey to the people, and how the people, those who were watching these films, then they definitely realized that how they have to come out of that kind of a situation which was there. So in that sense, when we try to assess the Duniya Na Mane, we find that personally I feel that this film was way ahead of its time. And when one is seeing this film, then one will realize that despite the kind of problems which were there in the society at that point of time, the filmmakers, they were thinking beyond. In that sense, they were trying to reform they were trying to reform the society in their own way by presenting such kind of themes to the society, where the society could also think that what kind of alternatives are available in the society, what kind of changes can be brought about by such kind of portrayals when they were being shown to the audience. Apart from that, we also see that V. Shantaram directed a film where the story of a simple-minded policeman and innocent prostitute was shown, and how the policeman falls in love with her and offers to marry her as well. But the prostitute was haunted by the moral legacy of the past, and she walks out of his life. So this film was made in 1939 with the title of Admi, and we find that this film, despite having some kind of failure in their love, the climax of the film was supporting a pragmatic approach to the problems of the life, or the frustrations of the life, and it was a conscious or a complete kind of opposition to the glamorization of the frustration in Devadas, which was made in 1935 in Hindi as well as in Bengali, and which had swept the country as well and had massive emotional effect on the younger generation. So this film was in a way response to Devadas, which was made by P.C. Barua, with P.C. Barua as playing the lead role in the Bengali version, and K.L. Sehgal playing the lead role in the Hindi version. So we find that how this particular film was seen by so many audience at that point of time, and it became so popular as well. But we find that how V. Shantaram saw it as some kind of a pessimistic film, and he says that he was appalled by the pessimism of Barua's Devdas and other such films as well, and how they were affecting the audience so strongly. So his answer was through Admi, and we find that how in the climax of the film, prostitute loses the courage and defeats herself. But Shantaram provokes society to a new thought. When will the society reclaim the prostitute who is more sinned against than a sinner? So this is the kind of idea Shantaram wants society to think about, that how a person who has been wronged, society, how the prostitute who has been wronged by the society, and when she wants to reform herself, so why is the society against it? And there were other films also which were talking about various kinds of concerns of the national movement. They were in the framework of the kind of reform which should be brought about in the society, as one of them was against the demonstration against the liquor through the exhibition of charkha, and various kinds of slogans which were emphasizing the independence. And we find that how the references to Gandhi and Patel, they were being made, and Patel also supported this project which was titled as the Brandy Ki Bottle or Brandy Chi Botli, and we find that it was made by Master Vinayak, and this film was trying to convey the patriotic fervor which could be seen where some kind of slogans and dialogues like Sharab Chhodna Azadi ki pehli manzil hai, giving up liquor is the first step in the attainment of independence. So such kind of slogans, they were being used in the film, and they were also saying that धन्य है गांधी बाबा और उनके माँ बाप जिनकी वजह से ये दिन देख रहे हैं. Long live Gandhi and his parents, by whose grace we are seeing these days. And how Gandhi is being referred as Azadi ka Devta or angel of freedom in this film. And we find that in Brandy Chi Batli or Brandy Ki Bottle, there is a we find that how when this issue of prohibition was there, then in the in the Swadeshi movement in 1905 or the non-cooperation movement in 1920 and the other movements which were led by Gandhi. For example, in 1930 the civil disobedience movement, and the picketing of the liquor shops was one of the important highlights of these movements, and how women they participated in the picketing of these liquor shops, because they were the ones, those who were the victims of the kind of problem which came to the household when men they indulge themselves in drinking. So this campaign against the evil of drinking brought them outside their homes. They came out of their homes and they participated in the public sphere as well, and this made them aware of not only about the social problems but also the political ones as well. And when women they came out and when they became part of the public sphere, then they came to know about the political issues which were there in the society. And we also see that how British they were following the divide and rule policy, how they wanted to divide the Indians on the basis of religion, and because of which we found that the partition of the country also took place, and how Muslim League in the Lahore session in 1940 demanded a separate nation for the Muslims, and the individual Satyagraha launched by Gandhi in 1940, it wanted to maintain the spirit of struggle among the masses. So in that particular framework, when the tensions between the Hindus and Muslims they were there in the society, and religious fanatics on the both sides they were there, and V. Shantaram made a film called Padosi in 1939, which was talking about the kind of misunderstandings which were being created in the society by the British, and the kind of conflict which was there by the vested interests of the third parties. And we find that it was also symbolic of what was happening in the reality as well. And so such kind of portrayals, when they were being made in the in the films, and how the filmmakers they tried to approach a problem from a more humane perspective, then the audience also were able to relate with these kinds of issues, and how we will find that some people from those who were fanatics, and how their interests they were being served by creating divisions in the society as well, and how the British policy of divide and rule, which became some sort of a hallmark of their rule in India, was also being talked about. Then we also talk about other films which were dealing with some of the concerns. Chandulal Shah, we find Achut made in 1940, which was a meaningful statement on the oppression of the untouchables, and suggested that solution for their upliftment lied in a ceaseless fight for their rights. And several related issues like the temple entry, drawing of water from the common wells, then hypocritical priests lusting for petty untouchable girls, physically belaboring of lower caste, they were all touched upon in this particular film. Then Sardar Patel also lent his voice to this particular film, because he said that if Achut really fulfills the ideals for which it is produced, it will have done a great and noble service to the cause of Harijans. Untouchability is a blot on Hinduism and on India, and must be wiped out as soon as possible. If picture Achut helps India to remove this cause, untouchability, it can be said to have helped India to win Swaraj, as untouchability is one of the chief obstacles in road to freedom. So this is what Patel said, and we find that the film magazines they were also saying that such a good film was so badly required, is now on the evil of untouchability in India, which is also stopping country from achieving its national independence. We also see that apart from this, a number of other films they were also being made during this time, as we talked about Achut Kanya. We talked about that how Achut Kanya definitely played an important role in the framework of the issue for untouchability. And when Achut was made, it was also trying to talk about the similar kind of a concern, and other kinds of issues they were also being talked about in the film, as temple entry, as we find that issues concerning this issue could also be seen among people, those who are living in the same vicinity. And the issue of drawing of water from the common wells was another prime concern which could be seen, and how the lower caste, they were engaged in the physical or manual work, and so this was another kind of a concern which could be seen in the Indian society. So we find that these kinds of issues, they were very relevant from the social point of view, and filmmakers, they were very well aware of these kinds of concern in the society, and when they made films like Achut Kanya and Achut, and there were others as well apart from that, those who were talking about these kinds of concern, then how they were also trying to see. One of them was Indira Ma, which was made in 1934, tackling the problems of the Western culture clashing with the Indian culture. Devdas in 1935, which was talking about the arranged marriages and the social barriers as well. Bal Yogini promoted the Hindu widow remarriage, and Adhikar in 1938 highlighted economic and social disparity. So we find that such kind of films which were made during this time, in their own manner, they were trying to they were trying to communicate the issues to the people of India, and when they watched these films, then definitely they were influenced by these kinds of ideas. As we talked about that how Devdas was protesting against the arranged marriages and the social barriers, and how alcoholism of the main character becomes some sort of a pretext against the kind of situation which was there in the society. And we also see that the issues of Western culture and the Indian culture in the framework of tradition and modernity could also be seen, that how Western culture was not was considered to be more open in nature, and how it would be some kind of a threat to the Indian culture. They were also being talked about. We also see some of the bodies which were being framed, organizations like PWA, Progressive Writers Association, under the presidentship of Munshi Premchand, and how so many aspiring writers and poets, they became part of it, and they wanted to introduce some kind of social realism and political awareness in the prevailing feudalist reformative action, and it gained the adherence of progressive intellectuals as well. And we find that other films, one of them which was made later as Mother India in 1957, but before that it was made as Aurat in 1940 by Mehboob Khan, and it was a landmark film, and how it portrays the saga of a courageous rural peasant women, and the film has had a rural background, and Mehboob had been very astute in characterization, details milieu and the dramatic incidents which were there in the film. And we find that this particular film was later made as Mother India in 1957 by Mehboob Khan himself. And this particular film was trying to communicate the kind of issues which are concerned with women, and it was also trying to communicate the rural life as well. And the problems of the rural folk, they are also being talked about in this particular film, and how the issues of starvation, poverty and penury, they are being depicted. They in a way force us to think whether the death feast which is shown in the film is a duty or a liability. So are all these religious rituals of any significance to the society? That is also being talked about in this particular film. And we also see the juxtaposition of two sons, Ramu and Birju, and how they reflect the good and evil respectively. Birju becomes a dacoit and finally gets killed by a gunshot of his mother when he tries to forcibly carry away daughter of a village folk, and she sacrifices her own son by her own hands to save the honor of a woman. And similarly, we find that when such kind of films, when they were being made and when they were trying to communicate those kinds of ideas in the society, then we find that the rural society, as India largely was rural at that point of time, we did not have the urban centers the way they are now. So in that sense, the problems of the rural society could be understood by the masses, and we find that scholars like Rangoonwala, they've argued that in its span came the whole range of women's existence, from a new bride to an aged mother, and so many of the eternal problems of the farmers as well. Then we also see that apart from such kind of portrayals, we also find that some of the other films of this particular period, they were also talking about religious tolerations, like Ekta, made in 1941, which was the first Hindi film or Sharda, which was tackling the problem of the child marriage, which was made in 1942. So many of these films, they were trying to see the concerns of those times, they were trying to reflect upon the issues of that particular period. As filmmakers, they were trying to communicate the ideas of social reform through the celluloid. Then we see the in 1946 the communal riots happened, and there was a film called Nargis which was released, and it stated that Nargis awaits return of peace with the rest of the city. And another film called Sindhu 1947 of Kishore Sahu, it depicted the condition of a widow and it advocated remarriage. So we find that how these kinds of films, they were trying to tackle some of the issues of the society in their own manner. And when we say that a film called Nargis is talking about the return of peace with the rest of the city, then definitely it is arguing for the case of peace in the city. And this kind of an idea, when they are arguing that the kind of peace which is required in the city should come, then they were also trying to communicate that it was not only commerce in that sense, but films, they were also concerned with this kind of an idea where one has to live peacefully in the society. Then as I told you that the condition of women in the framework of those who have become widow has been tackled time and again by some of the filmmakers, and how they also talk about the condition of a widow and how remarriage could be advocated in that sense. And we see that Dharti Ke Lal was made in 1946, and it was dealing with the Bengal famine, and the realistic portrayal could be seen, in the idea of British greed and apathy could be realized. And this film talks about the collectivization of the farms as well. So we find that such kind of portrayals, they were in the framework of the rural indebtedness of the Indians in that sense, and how the people, those who belong to the rural background or those who are the farmers, they were in a way affected by the Bengal famine, which appeared to be more of a British handiwork, because we find that the way they exported the food grains. So director had some kind of a social and moral commitment to this particular film, because we find that there is a lot of de-dramatization of the incidents, and non-professional cast and location shootings, etc., they were being used. And we also find that similar kind of a portrayal by Chetan Anand in a film called Neecha Nagar, and this also tries to communicate the story of in a way of the kind of society which was divided on the class lines. And some of the lyrics of this film, कि उठो कि हमें वक्त की गर्दिश ने पुकारा, जागी हुई राहें नई मंजिल को जाएंगी, हर दिल को नए जोश से आबाद करेंगी, खामोश निगाहें नहीं खामोश रहेंगी, आज़ाद हैं आज़ाद रहेंगी, मरना भी हमारा है तो जीना भी हमारा. So these were some kind of lyrics which were in a way seen in this particular film, that how people, they have to get up and how they have to go to a new destination. They are free in that sense, and they are free to take their own decisions. And we find that all these kinds of portrayals on the celluloid definitely contributed in that sense, and the idea of social reform in different manner was one of the important concerns of the films in India. So with this, I would like to end the discussion. Thank you very much.